I would just like to welcome Tim Forcey, who is joining us tonight. And just to give you a little bit of background about Tim, Tim graduated as a chemical engineer and has worked in industrial energy for 35 years in Australia and overseas, and for firms including Exxon Mobil, BHP, Jemena, and the Australian Energy Market Operator. Tim acted as energy advisor at the University of Melbourne, where he published research into Australia's electricity market, the pumped hydro energy storage, methane emissions from unconventional oil and gas production, and the economics of fuel switching from gas to renewable energy alternatives in industry as well as in homes. Over the last decade, Tim has been in over 1,000 Melbourne homes acting as a home energy advisor, and he's worked with the Victorian Residential Efficiency Scorecard. More recently, in an effort to spread information about the advantages of an all-electric home, Tim created the Facebook page My Efficient Electric Home, where 18,000 members every day help each other to save money in their ever more comfortable and greener electric homes. And I highly recommend that you join that group if you want to learn more about improving the efficiency of your own home. With that background, Tim's very well qualified to speak to us about supply and demand issues within the gas industry in Australia and how we can all do our bit to reduce our use of gas. Despite living in Melbourne, Tim is a cat supporter, so we know he has Geelong's best interests at heart. So welcome, Tim, and thank you for joining us.
I can't believe I don't have my cat's hat on. Where did that go?
And you can share your screen now if that's all right.
Yes, I will. And on that Facebook group, it's 18,500 now. So we've got a few more since the other day. So, and probably a few more tonight.
Excellent.
So I always stuff up this share screen business.
It's all right. That's the flavour of the night.
So I hit share screen. Then what?
Oh, so you'll get an array of screens that come up. You have to then choose the screen that you want to share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go down there.
Beautiful.
Wow. Okay. Good. All right. Yeah, I've got a few slides put together here. Sometimes with this Zoom stuff, I've written scripts to make sure that you don't fall asleep. I haven't written a script for this one, but hopefully we'll just keep it together here with the slides. This one says, and we've been working on the messaging here because I did just put in a submission to the Westernport item the other day, which kind of got me back into this and thinking about messaging, etc. So it's fun to be involved now on the other side of the bay, or in a different bay. Victorians can reduce gas burning at home and save billions of dollars per year. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. And we won't need a gas terminal. As the introduction said, I was involved with the University of Melbourne, after I finished up with my industrial work with BHP and AEMO, etc. And then at University of Melbourne, I had the opportunity to look at all those things, and we published a whole bunch of reports. So everything I'm going to talk about pretty much here tonight is something you can certainly find on the internet. And on these topics, I've presented everywhere from Darwin down through Sydney and across to South Australia, Mount Gambier and the Limestone Coast, and all over the place. So it is something that people seem to be interested to hear about. But if these Melbourne Uni reports are a bit too fat, I've also written a number of articles about all these topics, which may be a bit more accessible, and they're all things that you can find on the internet. So if you just Google my name, which is a pretty unique name, and then any topic you want, whether it's methane emissions or liquefied natural gas or all those things, you'll be able to find some of these reports and articles that I've put together. Okay. Reduce gas burning at home and save money. So that's the first topic that I'll get into. And this is kind of where the story starts. Back in 2015, well, even before then, I was a volunteer with Beyond Zero Emissions, and we did that buildings plan where we looked at getting all the buildings in Australia off of fossil fuels. And we found that it was doable. But one thing we didn't look at too hard at that stage was the economics, because back then gas was still pretty cheap. But since then, gas has gotten a lot more expensive, and these reverse cycle air conditioners just keep getting cheaper and cheaper, and more efficient and more effective. And so when you look at the economics of heating your house with a reverse cycle air conditioner, otherwise known as a heat pump, versus gas, well, now it's looking extremely attractive, or it was even in 2015 when I published the first report out of Melbourne Uni. And that got picked up in The Age and other places there. There's a headline down there from The Age that says, heat pump technology could save Victorian homes up to $658 a year. So that's all you got to do if you've got reverse cycle air conditioners already, is find the heat button, turn them on, and you can start saving hundreds of dollars a year, and we can stop burning so much gas, and then we won't need a gas import terminal. So that was the report in 2015. And then, of course, we did it in our own home. It was time for an upgrade of a heat exchanger down by the lounge room anyway, so we could watch the tennis in comfort on a January evening. But I always had in mind to use it as a heater, so we set that up appropriately, and then another one at the other end of the house. And then it took a couple of years, but after a couple of years, we were able to ditch the ducted gas, and I wrote down all the numbers and tried to do it a little bit scientifically. And so we ended up spending about a third to heat our house versus what we did with the ducted gas. So that's pretty remarkable. It wasn't a surprise. It was pretty much what you'd expect to happen. But still, it's quite a dramatic improvement. And that just goes to show that this is a way that Victorians and other Australians can start to save hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars a year, as we move to technologies that don't involve burning the fossil gas. Our home story was documented in that report, or that article you see there from Renew magazine, about comfortably ahead, a tale of two heaters. So this is how it works. The your reverse cycle air conditioner is an air source heat pump, and I'll go into that in more detail. But basically, it can suck heat out of the air outside your house. Even if it's 2 degrees outside, there's still heat in the air. I mean, we don't need to worry about running out of heat in the air unless it were like minus 250 at absolute zero on the surface of Pluto. But fortunately, on our planet, there will always be heat in the air. And with a correctly organized refrigerant system, you can suck heat out of the air, and then the refrigerant goes through a compressor, gets hot, and that's hot enough to heat your house. So basically, the sun puts heat into our air. So these air source heat pumps are another form of solar energy, really, that you don't even have to put on your roof. They suck heat out of the air, and you can heat your house with that. And then if it so happens that the sun's shining and you have the solar panels to drive the compressor in that refrigerant system, well, then that's certainly 100% renewable. Or if you're buying green energy off the grid, it's 100% renewable. So that's how that all works. And for every 1 unit of electricity you might need in a reverse cycle air conditioner to drive the fans and compressors, you might get 4 or 5 units, or maybe even 6 units of heat coming out of the thing. So that's why it's so cost effective now and can beat gas. So I'll just go through what is a heat pump briefly, because really this is the advantage of the gas industry. Humans have been pretty used to burning things for a long time. And we understand that if you burn something more, then it could make you warm. So that's the gas industry's major selling point, that they have a flame, you could set fire to it, and therefore you'll be warm. But when I try to describe to people how heat pumps can get renewable heat out of the thin air outside your house and pump it up to a temperature warm enough to warm you up, it is very confusing for people. So what is a heat pump? Well, that shows a sketch of it, but that's a little bit too complicated. I'll go to the next one. Here's another heat pump you're familiar with. It's called a refrigerator. And basically, a heat pump pushes heat in the direction opposite to the way it would naturally like to go. Same as a water pump. If you were halfway up a hill and you had a water pump and you wanted to pump the water up the hill, well, you'd need a pump to do that, because otherwise the water would naturally like to flow downhill. Well, heat is also a thing, and the heat would like to get from your warm kitchen into your fridge and spoil all your food. So they invented the refrigerator, which was the first heat pump, to turn that heat around the opposite direction and send it back out into your kitchen again, away from your food. And it takes a refrigerant system to do that. So you've got an expansion valve. The refrigerant goes through the expansion valve, gets really cold. Now it can suck the heat out of the food. Then the refrigerant cycles around, goes through the compressor. Now it's hot enough that it can go through another heat exchanger and transfer that heat from your food out into your kitchen. So that was a heat pump, and they said, well, that was really a good thing. Tell you what, maybe we could use the same technology to cool a whole room. Let's try that. And so they invented that, and that was called air conditioning. So we have a heat pump that's able to, the refrigerant gets very cold, goes into your lounge room on a hot summer day, sucks the heat out of your lounge room, goes outside, goes through the compressor, gets even hotter. So now that we can reject all that heat into the outside, and that's called an air conditioner in the summertime. It's pumping heat out of your lounge room. But then somebody really smart, it was probably a German, I suppose, said, well, what if we can run that around backwards? Maybe we can actually bring heat into a house. And that's exactly what the reverse cycle air conditioner does. In this case, on a cold winter morning, the refrigerant goes through the expansion valve, gets really, really cold, goes into the heat exchanger outside, sucks heat out of the air, then the refrigerant goes through the compressor and gets hot enough to heat your house. So if you want to really convince yourself of this, turn on your reverse cycle air conditioner in heat mode and go outside and stand next to it, and you will just feel all this cold air blowing around, and you'll start to get the idea that this thing has sucked heat out of the air. And then that heat goes into your lounge room and can very cost effectively heat your living spaces. And you can also do this for water as well. And in this part of the world, we do refer to these hot water systems as heat pump hot water systems, but it's basically a reverse cycle air conditioner that can heat water. So in this case, the refrigerant can get so hot that it is able to heat your water. And again, most of the heat that it is using to heat the water is not the electricity, it's the renewable heat that it was able to suck out of the air outside your house. Look, I'll confuse you a little bit here and say, these days we even have heat pump clothes dryers. Now, these things really have nothing to do with renewable energy, although, well, the electricity you put into them could be renewable. But basically, it's just a really efficient clothes dryer using a refrigerant system. And it's just so efficient, and it doesn't waste any heat that, we now have these things up to like 10 stars for these heat pump dryers. But that's a bit of a distraction. Let me go back to the hot water system. And what we see here, I'm trying to explain it. I'm saying with this hot water system, one part of electrical energy can give you 4 parts of hot water. How does it do that? Well, it is able to get 3 parts of free renewable heat from the air, which, like I said, is basically solar energy, because why does our air have any heat in it? Because of the sun. And so this is a way to suck heat out of the air, another form of solar energy that you don't even have to put on your roof. And even the Australian government recognizes this as being a form of renewable energy, because when you buy a hot water heat pump, the cost will be reduced because you get renewable energy certificates, just as if you had bought a solar PV system. So this is what it looks like out the back of my house right at the moment. It might not be that attractive, but I call it the underbelly of the electric home, because you can see the 3 heat pumps lined up there, one at either end. That's for heating and cooling either end of the house, and then the hot water system in the middle. So again, this is another article you can find on the internet. So that's how we can heat our homes and heat our water very cost effectively at a fraction of the cost of burning gas. So that's really important. And I call this economic fuel switching. So someday you all will have electric cars, and you will have fuel switched from petrol to electricity. And here at home, this is the opportunity to fuel switch away from gas and on to basically renewable heat. So that's the fuel switching that we need to do. But the other thing also to think about in your home is, don't forget about your thermal envelope. And so the draft ceiling, the insulation, all of those things are very important as well, because that's another way we can knock out gas. If you crawl up into your roof space and you find that the NBN person went up there and threw all your insulation off to the side, well, if you put that back, you can help to reduce gas use if you're still burning gas at home. And it's also going to make the job easier for your reverse cycle air conditioner, if that's the situation that you'll be heating with. And the same thing with draft proofing. Our homes are just so incredibly leaky, as we know, and so it's time to tighten those up. And well, one of the reasons our homes used to be leaky is because we were afraid our gas heaters would poison us. So if we're getting rid of the gas heating, we can also be tightening up our homes a lot more than they are now. So this was the sort of messages that I published out of Melbourne Uni in 2015 and did in my own house. But so who else is saying this? That this is the sort of way that we can save money? Well, other parties now have done research and they're saying the same things. So here is what used to be known as the ATA, the Alternative Technology Association, now known as Renew. So that's a not-for-profit organization that I'd recommend everybody get involved with. And they're fully on board with the all-electric home. And of course, they organize Sustainable House Day these days, I believe. And so they're excellent. And in 2018, they published a study where they looked at every different combination of house in every different part of Australia and worked out just how much money people could save. And of course, the cheapest thing is if you, by some miracle, already installed a reverse cycle air conditioner, well, you can start tonight with the heat button and you can start saving money instantly. But in other cases, you might have to spend money to save money, which means you might need to install a reverse cycle air conditioner or convert your gas hot water service over to the heat pump, or change the cooking from the gas to the electric induction. So there can be money to be spent, of course, to save money. And this study looked at all those possible combinations. So there we go. We had the Renew publishing this study, and they got some press in the Herald Sun and everything. So that was fantastic. So they're a voice. And here's another interesting voice here. This company says you shouldn't use gas in your home, and this company is AGL. So you'll find a number of AGL websites where they're saying that you should choose electricity over gas, and this will help you and it will help the environment. So there's a bit of a long story here, and who knows exactly why AGL is doing this, but there it is. We can use it for what it's worth. And what they did is they actually interviewed me, and they said, "What would you like to say?" And I told them all the things I wanted to say, and they ended up putting that on their website. So there you go. AGL's telling you to get homes off gas. And where else are we seeing this? Also, here is the Facebook group. So My Efficient Electric Home, it's not a Facebook page, it's a Facebook group. Pages are a bit easier to manage, but maybe not the most useful things, whereas groups are a lot harder to manage, but maybe very useful. So we've got, as I said, 18,500 members now or more, and that is people helping each other to improve their homes and get them off of fossil gas. I hope you're still out there and can hear all these things. It's always a bit lonely here in these Zoom presentations. I hope I'm not talking to myself.
It's terrific, Tim. Thanks.
Okay, great. Good for some feedback there, because I had a phone.
Keep going, Tim.
And I was wondering if someone was trying to get hold of me. Okay, I'll continue.
No. We're all here.
Great, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, back at My Efficient Electric Home, that's a place where you can see people who are doing this. So we now have thousands of case studies of people who are getting their homes off gas and being comfortable and saving money. And of course, it works even a lot better if you've got the solar PV panels, so that's an advantage. But even people without solar panels, they're saying, all right, I don't have a good roof or it's totally shaded, but guess what? I can use heat pumps to suck heat out of the air, another form of solar energy. So they're getting onto it in that way. So we needed to have all these case studies. This was the reason I put that group together, because if you go back far enough, we only had like one case study, and that was the house here of Richard Keach. And Richard, who is a co-admin on the Facebook group and was a longtime volunteer with Beyond Zero Emissions, he put together the book Energy Freedom Home. And this is the case study of his house, where you can see Richard's house in 2006, he was using a lot of gas in the red and some electricity in the blue. But then over time, and you don't necessarily do these things in 10 minutes, you know, it can take years to make the transition. But the sooner that you start, the sooner you can get there. And you can see over time, Richard totally eliminated gas in his house by switching to reverse cycle air conditioners for space heating, induction cooking, and a heat pump for hot water. And so he totally eliminated the gas. And the funny thing is, his electricity use didn't even go up that much. And this does not take anything into account for his 3 solar PV systems on the roof. That's not in this graph. And more recently, he's got an EV, electric vehicle, which changes things, but that's not in here. But basically, you see over time, he basically converted his house away from gas, and his electricity use hardly went up, because at the same time, he was probably, he probably got a more efficient television, and he changed out his halogen lights for LEDs, and he did a few other things. So the net equation was that his electricity has not really even hardly gone up. And we see a lot of members at My Efficient Electric Home doing this. They get rid of the gas, and a year later they look at their electricity use and it's hardly gone up, and they say, well, that was obviously a win. Here's another crowd that's leading. This is the government up in Canberra, the ACT. So initially, you may know that the ACT wanted to be 100% renewable with their electricity, and now they're starting to focus on the gas side, because nowhere in the world practically is it easier to get a house off gas and onto heat pumps and solar PV than Canberra, because they have about the most expensive gas in the world, and yet they've got great sun. And so we can really get those heat pumps working for them. But it's also a challenging place because they do get fairly cold there. And so it's been good to see that, all the things we talk about doing for Melbourne homes, where they're doing them successfully in Canberra. So if they work in Canberra, they're going to work down here. This is just a couple pieces of information from the ACT government, Act Smart. And there they got the running costs on that one chart. And the small one down the bottom, that's $223 a year for heating a 50 square meter living area, they say, with a 5.5 star reverse cycle split system. And that's cheaper than the $800 it would have cost with an old gas flued wall heater. And it's certainly a lot cheaper than using an electric element heater. So your standard resisted electric heaters, they are fair dinkum electric. It's 1 unit of electricity gives you 1 unit of heat, like a toaster. And so that's why they're so expensive to use. Resistive electric heaters are not heat pumps. They do not get free heat out of the air. And so that's why there you see $1,100, whereas down the bottom, only $200 for an efficient reverse cycle air conditioner. So that's the leveraging you're getting by using a heat pump. For only $200, you can get all the heat that it would have cost you $1,100 if you tried to use the other type of electric heating. So that's from the ACT. It's great to see that they're leading. So, is this really a lot of money? Is this really a lot of gas to be saved? And this is something that I just calculated the other day because I was talking to somebody. And so Victorians are spending something like $2 billion a year on gas. Now, obviously, by 2050, if we're 100% renewable, that they're going to be spending $0 on gas. So if there's $1 billion prize there, and it's actually more than that, it's probably close to $2.5 billion, but I went with the low ball. There's a $2 billion prize to be had there. Why don't we start grabbing it today rather than waiting to 2040 or 2050? We have the technology, it's cost effective, it's very useful, so go for it. Save yourself some money. And is it a lot of gas? Well, yes, it is, because if you look at what Victoria uses gas for, and so I put this table together, but it's data from the Australian Energy Market Operator, who publishes all this stuff. This is their forecast for Victoria for 2020. And I put this little table in my submission to Westernport, and I also put it up on Twitter over the last couple of days, and it's been very popular. But for Victoria, 60% of the gas we use in Victoria is in buildings. All you hear about in the media is, gas is a transition fuel for electricity. Gee, that's really interesting to talk about. It's all of 9% of the gas that we use here in Victoria. So really, it's nearly it's a very small thing. Where we are really using and wasting gas is in buildings, because, as of today, as of 5 years ago, we have cheaper options, better options for heating buildings, heating water than using gas. So there you go, 125 petajoules a year in buildings that we are just practically wasting. We're certainly economically wasting it, because now there are cheaper options. So the quicker we can get all these buildings off gas, the better. We can save a couple $2 billion a year, and we can save 125 petajoules a year, and that is a lot of gas. And guess what? If you thought you wanted more gas for industry or for electricity, well, here you go. Here's 125 petajoules. Have it. Do with it what you want. We suddenly found all this gas in all the suburbs of Melbourne. We didn't have to go and frack the Otways or anything. So it is a significant amount of gas. Now, just a little bit on policies. What policies do we need to make this transition? Here's a transition, getting off of gas, not onto it. So how do we make that transition happen? Here we see this report from Northmore Gordon, which was commissioned by Environment Victoria. It's an excellent report. It was done by Trent Hawkins, actually, who did the BZE buildings plan as well. He's working at Northmore Gordon these days. And so there they work out, again, all these numbers and show how much gas we could be saving if we weren't economically wasting it. And they also mentioned the policies that we could need to see this transition occur. And one of them, the main thing, is to inform Victorians, both householders and trades, just don't know about any of this. So this is all a very big secret, and the gas industry would love to keep it a secret, except for AGL with those strange web pages that they created. They're the only ones that have broken ranks. But, you know, you have all these advertisements by other gas companies on SEN, et cetera, on the radio, saying about how gas is the cleanest, greenest, nicest looking thing you ever wanted to have in your house. And, you know, a lot of the plumbers and others believe that as well, and a lot of householders. So there's obviously there is a disinformation campaign going on, and yet there's very little in the way of an information campaign other than, you know, My Efficient Electric Home. So we need the Victorian government to be doing things like the ACT government is now doing, and actually telling Victorians about how they could be saving $2 billion. And in fact, there's actually some perverse incentives that actually favor gas appliances. Now, why such a silly thing? Well, it's from the days when gas was cheap, and it was also seen as a greener thing than brown coal. And, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have argued with them for a couple of those situations 20 years ago. But here we are now where we've got efficient heat pumps. And so we should not see gas appliances getting, you know, favoritism from the regulations versus a cleaner and greener and cheaper to use heat pump. So we need to remove some of those silly regulations and disincentives, and even things that just ignore heat pumps. I mean, you look at some government websites and they pretend that heat pumps don't even exist. Hello. And in fact, we could have some incentives, more incentives for heat pumps versus gas. In the ACT, if you want to buy an air conditioner, you can get some money for the government to do so if you're replacing a gas heater. Now, that would be very new news for Victoria if we did that, but it is what we need to do. Okay, let's see what's next. Industry. So gas for industry, people say, whoa, we need a lot of gas for industry. You know, we use a lot of gas to make plastics, et cetera. Well, not really. And if you need the numbers, I can dig up the numbers because I used to work in the industry. Most of what we're using gas for in industry is like to heat water, you know, to like 60 degrees, which we can do with a heat pump in industry as well as you can do it at home. So fortunately, there are, you know, a lot of food industries, wineries, abattoirs, et cetera, around Australia are getting into the industrial scale heat pumps. But for them also, gas used to be cheap. And so they would just use the gas. You just get a cheap gas boiler to or heat your water, boil your water. You can do these things with heat pumps as well. So there are a lot of opportunities for industry to be operating more efficiently, you could say, or also tapping into renewable heat. So lots of opportunities for industry, which I won't get into that more tonight. But just to fill you in a little bit. So what happened? You know, this whole, you go back 20 years, gas was the cheap way to heat your home. Boom. You know, we did it in this house with the old ducted gas heating, but now it's the air conditioners that are the way to go. So what changed? Well, air conditioners have gotten a lot more efficient, and I could talk about that separately, but also gas got a lot more expensive. Now, why did that happen? Well, because we started exporting gas from Eastern Australia overseas. And so here you see this pie chart. So for 2020, 81% of the gas produced in Australia is going to be going overseas. It used to be that Esso and BHP, you know, they were interested in producing oil out of the Bass Strait, and gas was just a cheap byproduct. Hell, they were pretty happy to give it away, just get it out of the way because it was getting in the way of the oil production. And so everybody was happy with cheap gas. And then later on, the executives from Exxon would come over from Texas and say, you're giving this gas away, can't you charge more? And they're like, well, we tried, but you know, it's a buyer's market, so we couldn't get any more for the gas. Well, that all changed when the coal seam gas industry started up in Queensland, and they decided they could get all this gas out of the coal seams. And what were they going to do with it? The local domestic market wasn't big enough to take it. So they said, well, we'll export it all. And we can see that on the next graph. Down the bottom there, the purple, the yellow, the orange, that was the standard domestic use of gas in Eastern Australia for industry and generating electricity and in buildings. And then this big red elephant came along, and that's when they started producing all the coal seam gas and sending it overseas. But in so doing, it also gave all the other gas producers like Esso and BHP and Santos, et cetera, the opportunity to say, hey, you know, I think you ought to pay international prices for your gas now because we could just flog this to the LNG guys and send it overseas. And so that's what happened. And so the price of gas went way up, because you can see from this map, you know, the whole eastern part of the country is all connected up with pipelines. So that was the way that it went from being a buyer's market to being a seller's market, where the sellers said, you want gas, you got to pay international prices. But they have shot themselves in the foot a little bit, because they lost me as a customer when gas prices went up. But they really haven't felt the pain too much of people switching away from gas just yet. That's what needs to happen. Now, is there going to be a gas shortage? This graph shows you 2018 versus 2025. These graphs come from the Australian Energy Market Operator, where I used to be the gas planning principal. And so, yeah, to me, it's no surprise what we see for 2025. Basically, by then, the sweet gas fields at Bass Strait will be depleted. So brim, marlin, snapper, barracuda, flounder, tuna, they'll be depleted. And Esso will be left producing the sour gas fields, Kipper and Turum. And so there is still, you know, a decade or more of gas. These charts don't go out to 2030. We'd like to see those too, but they haven't been published. But Esso's down to producing the dregs of the bunch, Kipper and Turum, and they have high naturally occurring carbon dioxide in them. Of course, that's another greenhouse gas, but they can't send that down the pipe to your kitchen, so they've got to take it out and just vent it up into the atmosphere. Of 1 million tons a year of carbon dioxide, they got to take out of the Kipper and Turum gas, and they build a special plant for that at a cost of a few $1 billion. It's called the gas conditioning plant down at Longford. And so in the future, 2025, they're only going to be able to produce gas out of Kipper and Turum at the rate that they can fit through that gas conditioning plant. And so that is going to limit the red that you see on these graphs. That limits what Esso and BHP will be able to produce out of Longford all year round. Now, they used to be able to ramp up to meet the winter peak when we're wasting all this gas in buildings. With just Kipper and Turum and the gas conditioning plant, they won't be able to do that. They'll just idle along at a pace that you see there, 500 terajoules a day through the most of the year. We will see a lot more gas come down the pipelines from Queensland. That's the yellow you see coming in there. But even with that, there's still not enough gas if you think this is the picture. And so this is why AGL is talking about a gas import terminal, and why Viva is talking about a gas import terminal. And there's gas import terminals talked about for Adelaide and for Wollongong and for Newcastle. And also the pipeline company APA says they will expand the pipelines coming down from Queensland so that yellow bar there can get a bit thicker. So that's how AGL came to the conclusion, whoops, maybe we should be thinking about a gas import terminal, and Viva as well.
Tim,
so that's the
Tim, just to interrupt.
Yep.
Sorry. How are you going there?
Well, we can cut this off at any time, because yeah, we can cut this off. I've got the last few slides, which we're going to talk about the dirtiness of gas, but we can do that another time maybe. So yeah, this graph here is pretty key, and what it says to me is no, we don't need a gas import terminal. What we need is to stop wasting all that gas at wintertime in the buildings, and there you won't need all that wintertime gas there shown across June, July, August, September. Let's do that with heat pumps instead. I could stop there or go on for another 5 minutes about emissions.
I think we would love to have some questions, I think, and I think there's been a fair few coming through. Neil, is that right? With the chat box there?
Yes, they have.
So thank you, Tim, for that.
Right,
I will throw to Neil now, if that's all right. Thanks, Tim.
Kill the screen share.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Tim. That was excellent. And I've been following some of your videos on YouTube and your papers and terrific stuff. Okay, how about I just read out two of the early questions that we got. The first one was from Phil. Phil says, I have questions about the temporal gap between the end of profitable gas and the emergence of dispatchable 24/7 renewable energy at a scale large enough to run an economy that looks even remotely like the one we're used to. Is anyone examining this question? Are you okay to respond to that, Tim?
So that's talking about electricity, right?
Yes.
It's about
Yeah.
all forms of primary energy.
So is anybody looking at it? Yeah, gazillions of people are looking at the electricity side, for sure. And, you know, in terms of gas, we waste a lot of gas in buildings. We need to stop doing that. And if you want to use that gas for other stuff, there you go.
Thanks, Tim.
That's the part that's not being talked about. You could call it the demand side of gas. You know, in the old days with electricity, it was just supply, 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 because they thought electricity demand would just keep growing. So let's just keep supplying electricity. And it's only in more recent times they said, well, hang on, maybe we could do things like, you know, not run pool pumps during the hottest part of a heat wave, et cetera. And so they started to look at the demand side for electricity. We need also to be looking at what we're doing with respect to gas demand. And, you know, if anybody did that other than me, if anybody did that, you'd quickly see all these opportunities and you'd say, wow, you know, we don't need to be using all these fossil fuels we thought we did.
Tim, can I just ask a question? Can I get a clarification there?
Sure.
Look, we need to get off gas as quickly as possible. I totally agree there, but I'm concerned that, as you've just pointed out, that we're going to run short of gas, and short of all these changes occurring to the patterns of usage for gas, I'm concerned that we may run short of gas prior to there being sufficient renewable, particularly dispatchable renewable with backup batteries or pumped hydro to run the economy. So what happens if there's a gap between those two things, that gas becomes unaffordable or unavailable, and we don't yet have sufficient backed up dispatchable electricity from wind and solar?
Well, gas isn't unavailable if you really wanted to get your hands on it. You know, we're exporting like 80% of what we produce here. So if you or, you know, a government or any authority wanted gas, there's plenty to be had. That's not the issue. Affordability, yeah, gas is already too expensive to burn. So renewables and even batteries. I mean, AGL is investing in batteries now because they see that as a cheaper option than building some gas engines and trying to get a contract for gas to supply some electricity. So yeah, we need to be building these batteries, you know, very quickly, because gas is already too expensive to burn, and that's why our electricity prices had gone up there for a period of time.
So do you mean that there'll be a seamless
Excuse me, Phil. We're just going to move on to the next question.
All right, thank
please.
you.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
The next question I had on the screen was from Sandhya. How far along is the development and use of non-climate warming coolant gases?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So in the heat pumps, in the air conditioners, they have refrigerants, and unfortunately, some of them have very high global warming potential. They used to have the big ozone destroying potential, but those have been phased out, largely phased out for Australia. And, you know, nobody working on an air conditioner is meant to just vent all that refrigerant into the atmosphere, because it's either probably going to hurt the ozone layer or or impact the global warming. So those things are meant to be managed by licensed professionals that don't just leak the stuff, but inevitably some of it does leak. So it is better to have less harmful refrigerants. And one that is quite relatively benign from a global warming point of view. You might be surprised are those hot water heat pumps that use carbon dioxide as a refrigerant. And you say, well, hang on, carbon dioxide is a global warming gas as well, isn't it? Yeah, it's got a global warming potential of 1, but that means it's better than some of the other refrigerants that might have a global warming potential of 300 or 1600. So that's been a bit of a breakthrough, where we're seeing the carbon dioxide refrigerants being even used on the residential scale. Propane has low global warming potential, but there's been concerns about that from a flammability point of view, and so the regulations don't necessarily allow it. But when you look at how much propane we're actually talking about, it's a pretty tiny amount. So what's the risk? Yeah, there is plenty of work being done on trying to have more benign refrigerants. I wouldn't say I'm a complete expert on it. I guess I'm more involved with, you know, what can people buy today on the Australian market? What's there is there. Yeah, we need things to improve, but let's look at what options we have today on the market and make the best choices there. So yeah, have a look at the global warming potential of the refrigerant for whatever heat pump you're thinking of buying.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Tim. Look, we do have a few more questions have come in, but just I know we're getting close to 8 o'clock, and I've got to give you the poll results. So let me just do that, share those results now.
And just to let you know too, Tim has kindly offered to answer a few more questions after we finish as well, Neil. So perhaps we can come back to some of those questions later.
Yeah, terrific.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so there, can everybody see those poll results now?
No.
No?
Yes.
Yeah. Some people can, some people can't.
It's just my night.
So let me read them out. How do you use gas in your home currently? For room heating, so we had 27 responses, 44% for room heating, 44% for hot water, 59% for cooking, and we've got 19% that don't use gas for anything. So interesting. So quick one for you, Tim. How does that 20%, 19 to 20% look to you in terms of people not using gas?
Probably the 19% is higher than I would have expected, and like those 44% are probably lower than I would have expected. So you guys are doing a lot of gas-free stuff down there.
Yeah, I can't vouch that this is representative of the whole of Geelong, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I go to a lot of houses as part of my business and help people out, and so, you know, I see a lot of people that are certainly on gas, and you know, after I'm done with them, then of course they're probably going to make some moves to reduce it. But the big one is the room heating. If you look at the actual petajoules of gas that you use, or that we use as a society, it's largely for the room heating. So if that's the first thing you can make a dent in to reduce the room heating and get onto the air cons, great. The hot water, we were talking earlier today, even if your hot water system says 10 years old, you know, it'd probably be a good time to start at least researching heat pumps and understand what you might replace it with, because it's really hard to make a smart decision when you're cold, wet, and naked, and or even worse, when your partner's cold, wet, and naked and just came out of the shower because the hot water system failed. So get your head around heat pumps so you're ready to make a move. And there's some really good rebates out there at the moment. You know, for my daughter, for example, she just got a hot water heat pump for like $1,000 for her townhouse. And you know, all the hot water systems in that area are all failing at the same time. They're 20-some years old, and everybody else is putting in gas units, and they're sitting there with the only one with the heat pump, which is pretty cool. And they probably spent less than those people are spending to replace with gas because of the rebates. And then you're left with cooking. And for everybody, you know, people say, "Oh, I love gas cooking." I say, "Have you ever tried induction?" They go, "No." So how do you know you love it versus something else you might even love even more? So there are induction cooktops you can get hold of even for like $50 at Aldi or $100 for a double unit. They may not be the most sensitive and controllable, but they're still pretty good, and they can be quite impressive. That can be a way to put your toe into the water with the induction cooking. We've got one of those, and it's like a hot plate. You can use it outside in summer, and cook food outside without heating up the kitchen. So that's a handy little way to at least try to understand what the induction's all about.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tim. I'd just like to say thanks on behalf of the group for a very informative talk. Thank you.